Discerning Hearts provides content dedicated to those on the spiritual journey. To continue production of these videos, prayers, and more, go to discerninghearts.com and click the donate link found there or inside the free Discerning Hearts app to make your donation. Thanks, and God bless.
DiscerningHearts.com presents Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors. I'm your host, Kris McGregor, and I am delighted to be joined by Anthony DeStefano, who is the best-selling author of 30 Christian books for adults and children, including A Travel Guide to Heaven and 10 Prayers God Always Says Yes To. He has been the host of 2 television series on the Eternal Word television network. With Anthony DeStefano, we go inside the pages of The Miracle Book, a simple guide to asking for the impossible, published by Sophia Institute Press. Anthony, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I always love our conversations.
I have to tell you, I was so excited when I saw that you had not only just another book, but this particular book. I have to say, The Miracle Book, a simple guide to asking for the impossible. I thought, oh, he's the perfect one to write this. I mean, whether it was the travel guide to heaven or the book on prayer that you've written, the way you are able to just make it so clear and simple without it being, how can I say this, in matters in regards to faith and, again, to prayer, you have a way of breaking it open. So you have those aha moments. Well, I knew that, but I didn't know I knew that. And there's very few who are able to do it, and you're one of those.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's what I try to do. You want to make things simple. You want to make things as easy as possible. But the trick is you have to do that without compromising the theology. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy to make things very simple if you throw correct theology out the window. Then you can make things very simple, especially when it comes to a book on miracles, because so many people out there are so eager and anxious to get a miracle that they sort of want to believe whatever you say. And so you sort of have a license to steal, kind of a thing. And so I'm very happy. It makes me very gratified, proud that you say something like that, because I have tried in all my books to be as simple as possible, but orthodox and traditional. And I try that in my children's books too. I try to make everything as simple as I can. Anyway, thank you.
Well, I love it because especially with this book, The Miracle Book, I think you've answered so many important questions. I think for many of us, when we think of I need a miracle, it's more about I have a want. Now, it may be a good want, but it may not necessarily actually fall in the realm of I need a miracle for it to happen. It may not, the instruction and how you kind of guide us into having the and more ordered prayer or viewpoint on this, I think is very essential.
Well, thank you. And that was one of the things I learned too. Whenever I write books, you learn a lot too. You have to do research, and you have to read a lot of books. And there are some great books on miracles out there. C.S. Lewis wrote books. Lots of people wrote. Smarter people than me, holier people than me, have written about miracles. So I learned a lot, and it was and I was happy to learn about the subject of miracles myself. And what really intrigued me, and I say this in the book, is that the whole book really hinges on a riddle. Do miracles happen every day, as the saying goes, or are they as rare as winning a lottery? And that really intrigued me, because people do say all the time miracles happen all the time, and yet most of us know by experience that when we pray for a miracle, we don't usually get one. So what's the deal? What statement is true? And you alluded to it just now. The answer is, both statements are true. If you use the strict definition of a miracle, which is a supernatural intervention by God in the natural order of things, like the parting of the Red Sea or the overnight disappearance of a malignant tumor without any treatment, then yes, those kinds of miracles are very rare. But if you're talking about miracles in a more general way, defined as an extraordinary answer to prayer that maybe goes against the laws of statistics, but unfolds through perfectly natural means. Like for instance, someone who doesn't have any money and is about to lose his house maybe and prays for a miracle, and then suddenly, he receives the exact amount he needs through an inheritance or some other kind of gift. Those kinds of crazy quote unquote coincidences do happen all the time. They're from God. They're part of his divine plan. They're an answer to prayer, but strictly speaking, they're not true miracles that would be, authenticated by the Catholic Church, let's say. So anyway, the bottom line is it's not really a contradiction to say that miracles are rare but also frequent. It depends on the how you define miracles, and in my book I talk about both types.
You know what I love in that second chapter when you were talking about miracles is that you make that important distinction that God is a God of order and that he works within that to accomplish all things.
Yes, I do, and that's a point that I've made before in several of my books, because some religious people think that God is just going to go and reach down into the world like a thief in a jewelry shop and break all the glasses in order to accomplish his will. God created the natural order. He created the laws of nature, and he respects them. He created the universe and everything in it and the laws that govern it. So, you know, he when he interferes with those laws and performs a miracle, he doesn't usually break them blatantly by suspending the natural order. He interacts with them in a way that changes the outcome of a particular situation, maybe. Now that sounds complicated, but as I say in the book, human beings do something like that all the time. If the weather is rainy and cold, we don't try to magically raise the temperature before leaving our house. What we do is we put on a hat and coat and gloves to keep us warm and dry. So we interfere with nature in a manner of speaking, but we don't break any meteorological laws. Well, God has much greater power than we do. So consequently, he has a greater ability to supplement the laws of nature to achieve his aims. For instance, when Moses parted the Red Sea in the book of Exodus, God used a miracle, but he didn't necessarily violate any laws of physics or marine biology by making a whole tract of water magically disappear. He may have just, introduced a new event into the pattern of nature, like perhaps, unexplainable winds, that had the effect of displacing the water on the Red Sea in a way that the Israelites were able to walk over its seabed. So it sounds like it's not an important distinction, but it is because it shows the character of God. He's a God of order.
Yeah, I liked when you brought up the example of sometimes when you have an illness, for example, and you'll pray for a miracle, there is so many things going on oftentimes in for example, my own brother had a massive heart attack and they ended up shocking him almost 19 times. But and then they will say it's almost remarkable. The doctors won't say a miracle, but they said they've never seen anybody be able to recover in the way that he did. Well, so what happened? He lived only a few blocks from one of the best heart centers in the state of Michigan. He had a team of people working on him, throughout 24/7. And yes, God's action in this, absolutely, not only through their care and love, but also through his grace. There's so many factors in that great order of his, the bigness of God, that he allowed something really quite extraordinary to occur.
Yeah, it goes to the one of the most profound questions in all theology, and that's this mystery of free will and providence. You know,
Hmm.
how does God plan out everything and yet allow us to have free will? And the truth is, God knows everything from all eternity. He knew that your brother was going to have that all eternity, that have that problem. Uh, he didn't force anybody's will, though. Everybody was
Hmm.
allowed to keep their free will, but he somehow saw all the free choices, even the free choice of your brother moving next to that hospital or what have you. And
Hmm.
he arranged those free choices from all eternity, so that the outcome he wanted, including, by the way, the prayers that he saw being offered. He arranged all those free choices in a way that it came out to his outcome without taking away from the freedom of those choices. This is that profound mystery of providence and answered prayer. So yeah, I mean, you could write, you could write lots of deep books about that subject and still never fathom it.
Yeah, again, the title of the book is The Miracle Book, A Simple Guide to Asking for the Impossible. Now, that subtitle of the book, I mean,
Mm.
is really important, isn't it? Asking for the impossible.
Yes, and it's a simple book, but it's not an easy book. I want to say that because it is of what you mentioned, the Travel Guide to Heaven, one of the first book I wrote, and 10 Prayers God Always says yes to. Those were simpler to understand. You know what I mean? But in a book on miracles, you've got to be careful about your language. I'm a skeptical New Yorker, and I'm very I understand people being skeptical. I was an agnostic for many years, and I've always been allergic to any kind of superstition. So as Christians, we're supposed to be skeptical on anything, especially of anything that smells like magic. You know, so I wanted to make sure that this book was theologically correct. It's got an imprimatur. It's been endorsed by some cardinals and bishops and things like that. You know, but in order to do that, you've got to take the time to unpack things carefully, and especially on a topic so important. We are saying people can be asking for the impossible here, and I'm expecting that people are going to read this book who are at the end of the rope. People who there's a tumor that can't be that's inoperable, or a marriage that's falling apart, and or a kid that's hooked on heroin. Um, or someone's being audited and about to face a tremendous scandal. Who knows what miracle it is they need? And I don't want to lead people on with false hopes, but at the same time, I want to give them hope because we know that it is a biblical fact that miracles occur. And Jesus performed miracles all the time. He made some very bold promises about them. He said, "Ask and you shall receive. Nothing will be impossible for you if you believe. Whatever you ask for in my name, I'll do it." These aren't vague, wishy-washy statements. They're clear assurances that God can and will perform the impossible for his followers. So millions of people believe in miracles, not because they're fools or because they're superstitious, not because they're members of a cult, but because they have faith in Jesus Christ, sometimes because they've seen something impossible happen with their own eyes. So again, I'm not selling anything in this book. My invitation is simply for people to be open. No need to check your brains at the door. As a matter of fact, you're going to need your brains for this book. But at the same time, don't slam the door shut. You have to give God a chance to surprise you.
I love this book.
I
People have
appreciate
to,
it.
I want to give it, I already have multiple copies that I'm already sending out to friends and because I know they're going to love it.
You're
And
very
I know they're going to want to pass it on to others because, I mean, you break open the understanding about paradox, the miracle
yes,
paradoxes.
yes.
And that, if you get that, then all of a sudden it's like a paradigm shift.
Well, let me tell you, I've been, you know who I thank for that? A good old G.K. Chesterton. I've been reading
Mm,
G.K. Chesterton for a long time, and he's a difficult author too.
yeah.
But I say that C.S. Lewis is like water and G.K. Chesterton is like wine. C.S. Lewis is so clear and so simple to understand. It's so ordered. G.K. Chesterton, though, he's a deeper than that, but he makes your head dizzy sometimes. He can make you almost
Hmm.
drunk with ideas. And he is the father of these kinds of paradoxes. And I do think paradoxes are key to understanding miracles. Paradoxes are truths that seem to contradict themselves on the surface, but they actually reveal a deeper truth when you reflect on them. For instance, everybody knows the paradox, less is more, or the only constant is change, or the closer you look, the less you see, on and on and on. Christianity is filled with paradoxes. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. You must die to yourself in order to live. God is one, but God is three. Jesus Christ is fully God, yet fully man. These aren't
Hmm.
just poetic ideas. They reflect the reality that God is an infinite being and that we're just finite creatures. We can only understand bits of God's infinite truth a little at a time. And sometimes those bits of truth, they look like they might contradict each other, but in reality, uh, we just can't see the whole truth because it's too big for us to see. So
Hmm.
by embracing paradoxes, we can actually come closer to appreciating the mystery and the wonder of God. And I think this fits into miracles in a very deep way because of what I just said before. Jesus made some very clear statements about miracles, and yet sometimes, you know, we don't get what we want for in prayer. And it's this thesis of my book that these statements of Christ, while completely true, 100,000% accurate, they're not so straightforward as they sometimes seem. They are in reality paradoxes, and they involve embracing pairs of truths that sometimes seem to contradict each other. And they're really meant to be held simultaneously. And sometimes that's hard to do. And the book, unpacks 7 of these paradoxes.
I mean, one of my favorite, and I'm so glad it really kicks off that whole line of thought because it's spoken prayer versus soul prayer.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and that the things that we say with our lips isn't really what our soul, deep down, the heart, where the heart is, where he dwells, that's not really what we're asking for.
Right, not all the time. It could
Hmm.
be.
Yep,
It
you're
could
right.
be. Sometimes they are right in alignment, and sometimes we're lucky in that, and sometimes we're advanced spiritually. And the more you reflect, and the more you go, you worthily receive communion, and the more you make use of the sacraments, the clearer your divine vision is. You get to put on these divine glasses, I call them, and you can see
Mm-hmm.
things a lot more clearly. And that's when what you say is in alignment. But even sometimes for people who are very advanced in sanctity, they have trouble understanding the difference. Yes, the spoken word, even if it's passionate and heartfelt, doesn't always reflect the real desires and the real needs we have. We may be praying for something like a restored relationship or a son or a daughter, making it into a prestigious college, or winning the lottery, or even being cured of some disease. But our souls may be longing for something even more profound, like deep peace or freedom or security or love or significance or joy or healing from wounds that we don't even realize we have. So
Mm-hmm.
for instance, if you're praying for a certain job at a big company, what you really might be praying for is what you think that job will give you: more financial freedom, or a feeling of importance, or a way to advance your career. If you knew that that job was going to make you miserable, you wouldn't be praying for it. Well, God can see the future, and He knows that. And in His wisdom, He listens not only to the words that come out of our mouth, but to the silent cry of our souls. Jesus says in the Gospels, what father would give his child a scorpion or a snake when he was asking for a fish or an egg? Well, sometimes we don't even realize that what we're asking for God for is scorpions and snakes, and being a good father, He doesn't give them to us, and we're lucky.
Yeah, and I'm as guilty as the next person. You've got some financial issues, and you think if I just get that lotto ticket, somebody's got to win. Why not me, Lord? I mean, I would do all these good things, and the solutions that we have are so tiny often than what He actually the bigger picture and the greater good. But it's trusting that He loves us enough to take care of us better than we can take care of ourselves. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what happens too. We get afraid of something, or we get desire for something, some kind of ambition for something. And naturally, we come up with a solution to how we're going to, overcome that fear, or how we're going to accomplish that goal. And naturally, if we believe that God is all powerful, we try to get Him involved in the solution that we've come up with.
Right.
That's what we ask God for. But meanwhile, like you said, He's so beyond us. He's already in the future. He knows what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now. We don't even know what's going to happen 10, 20 minutes from now. So, of course, the solution He comes up with is going to be much better than ours. But sometimes, it takes time for Him to arrange things. And sometimes we have to go through certain things. Like in you gave a financial example. Look, I've had the same problem. I've wanted to win
Hmm.
the lottery, but guess what? Knowing me, and the way I like to spend money sometimes, or at least in my past, had I
Hmm.
won the lottery, you know what? My bills would have been wiped out for maybe a couple of months, and then I would have had much bigger bills, and I would have been in real financial trouble and legal trouble too. And so I'm glad. It's hard to say, but I'm glad he didn't let me win any lotteries, but made me, learn how to budget my money first, let's say, and learn how to be a better steward first before blessing me with financial resources.
That's the beauty when you outline those seven paradoxes and you really kind of break each one of those open. I
Hmm.
think it's important for everybody to be able to sit with those. I mean, because you talk about in number three, for example, is the value of persistent prayer, right?
Yeah.
Versus the need to have a decisive prayer, a
Oh,
faith.
yeah. Yes. Yes. That's one of the most challenging for people to grasp.
Hmm.
How could we be persistent in faith, continually asking, seeking, and knocking, all of which implies a kind of uncertainty about whether
Hmm.
God is going to answer us or not, while at the same time having a decisive faith, which by definition means being unwavering and confident that God will answer us. It seems like we're being asked to step on the gas and the brakes at the same time.
Right.
On one hand, we're being encouraged to, you've heard to storm the gates of heaven with prayer day after day, and the hope
Yeah.
that God might grant our request. And in the Gospel of Luke, you see the story of the widow who pesters the unjust judge until he relents, and Jesus tells us to imitate her perseverance. On the other hand, we're asked to believe that from the moment we've uttered our prayer, God has already heard it. He's heard it from all eternity. He knew that we would need something badly and that he would come to our rescue. So, for instance, we see Jesus saying things like in the Gospel of Mark, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. So, how can we do both at the same time? And I think the key is to understand what true faith is. True faith
Hmm.
isn't, and this is a big point in the book, and it's a big part of Catholic spirituality. True faith isn't an emotional feeling that we have to keep up. It's not about experiencing euphoria or optimism or even feeling certainty that we're going to get what we pray for, which is something that our Protestant brothers and sisters often mistake true faith for. Like forgiveness and like love, true faith is an act of the will. It's a decision to trust God no matter what. It's choosing to place our confidence in the goodness and power of God, even when our emotions are all over the place, and they always are. They're like a roller coaster. The bottom line is, our faith must be able to survive our mood. So I think in order to pray with persistence and decisiveness, we have to do this with we have to do it with calmness. We don't have to try to feel faith. We have to think faith, and we have to keep thinking faith. That's something you can always do no matter what mood you're in. You just keep
Hmm.
deciding that you believe. That's the kind of persistence that makes us stronger and purifies us. And I think if you live out that paradox, I think that's when miracles really start to happen.
And so many of us have stories in our lives that if we go back and we reflect on certain things after a period of time, we can see where was in that moment and helped to do that. And you in the book, again, so beautifully as you do in all of your writing, you bring forth personal stories and you talk about a very compelling one about your father and
Mm.
his illness and what happens with that unanswered prayer.
Yeah, and we discover later that it really wasn't an unanswered prayer, and that
Hmm.
goes to the heart of another paradox, which is that we have to be precise in our prayers, but we also have to be, very open to how God wants to answer us. My dad, he died about 12 years ago. He was diagnosed with a deadly blood disease, and the doctors gave him a year to live, basically. And, my brother's a priest. I write books for the church. We're all involved in the church in one way or another. So we stormed the gates with heaven. And all we really asked God for was, another year or two, a few extra months. Just we didn't want the doctors predictions to come true. And we did everything, novenas and masses every day, and prayed to all the saints. And
Mm-hmm.
guess what happened? He died exactly on schedule. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a pleasant kind of, it wasn't an easy kind of death. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking about this very naturally now, but I was very close to my father, and I'm a passionate Italian, so
Mm-hmm.
you can imagine there was wailing and all kinds
Mm-hmm.
of emotions going on. But
Mm-hmm.
I realized after the fact, in retrospect, that during the year that my father was ill, I was able, because of the way God arranged my life, I
Mm-hmm.
was able to visit him every single day. And I was able to take him to his weekly doctor's appointments and transfusions and such. Before he got sick, I was like any other kid. I didn't see my father every day. I saw him every, few weeks, when it was sometimes less, sometimes more,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes less. I realized after that, if I added up all the times that I saw him in that amount of time period, and and you spaced it out over a few weeks or months like I had been before he got ill, I had asked God for a couple more years. What he really gave me was something like 10 or 15 extra years, according to the time that I spent with my father. And during that time, there were lots of breakthroughs in our relationship, lots of healings in family relationships. In other words, I asked for what I thought was the solution to a problem. Give me some more time with my father. He died on schedule, but God, seeing the big picture, did answer my prayer. He gave me the miracle. He gave me much more time, and he made that time much, much more meaningful. And so that's why we always have to have I articulated all that not too well, not as much as I felt it at the time. But believe me, it was a big thing to realize that God did say yes to us. And it makes you look deeper at all the other prayers in your life that you think he said no to, and he really said yes to. If we have another minute, I'll tell you.
Sure, please. For you, I
Oh,
could listen to you all day. As a
oh,
matter of fact, I have to say, getting your audiobooks are the best because oftentimes you're the one reading them. And it's like I can't tell you the plane rides I've taken with you.
well,
Just it's like hear it over and over again. And I just love it.
I'm so sorry for you that you have to listen to my nasal New
Oh,
York
stop
voice.
it.
I
No.
it's I wouldn't wish that on anybody. There's only one book that I didn't read myself. It was a book on hell. It's called Hell, a Guide, and they wanted
Mhm.
a professional reader for it. And it did sound better, but I will say that it didn't quite have my level of, let's say, passion, if I want to use that word. But
But
uh,
I
but
didn't
in
want to
any
knock
case,
you off track though. But give me your other story.
no, no, no. Just I wanted to be a doctor my whole life.
Hmm.
From the time I was a little boy. I wanted to be a doctor. I went to a special high school. I daydreamed about it. I fantasized about being a doctor. And I would have become a doctor too if for a couple of little things didn't get in the way, like organic chemistry and
No.
integral calculus and girls and things like that. But it was a big disappointment not to be a doctor. And
Hmm.
I prayed about it. I wasn't very religious back then at all, but I prayed, and it seemed for sure like God said no to me, you know, and I
Hmm.
was very, very upset with God. But again, in retrospect, years later, after spending a lot of time in hospitals and doctor's appointments with lots of people in my family, I realized I would have been miserable as a doctor or a surgeon. I would have hated the long, grueling hours. I would have hated the hospital bureaucracy. I would have hated dealing with all that blood. And when I became committed to my faith again, and when I started reading authors like C.S. Lewis, specifically a book called The Screwtape Letters, a realization came to me that maybe what I wanted deep inside wasn't to be a doctor specifically. Maybe I wanted to be a healer of some kind, and maybe it wasn't my destiny to heal with a scalpel, but maybe I could help heal people with words. Because words can heal
Hmm.
too. With books like this on miracle, if I could get one person out there a miracle with this book, then that'd be much better than all kinds of surgeries that I would have, and I'm much more satisfied and fulfilled being a writer. So again, I realized that God did say yes to my prayer. He just said, "Hey, look, I need some time to arrange things. I've got to show you some other things." I wish I would have been open to it back then because I wouldn't have had so much angst and I wouldn't have been so upset with God. I wish I would have just rolled with the punches more and trusted God and said, I know you've got something better planned for me.
But look how you're doing it now. And you got so many years ahead of you.
Well,
It's like,
I don't know about that. I hope so. You
uh,
never know. You know,
I hope so. Well,
God, the same God that promises you the that gives you the morning does not promise you the evening. And I live
mm,
by that. I used to know John Cardinal O'Connor in New York, and one of the things he always said to me was, Anthony, I don't care how young or healthy you are, you always got to have your bags packed. The bags got to be packed, meaning you
wow.
gotta be ready at all times. You got to be ready at all times because you could be hit by a bus, you can have an aneurysm, a heart, you don't know what can happen. And
Right.
you got to be ready to meet your maker.
Oh,
Hope I have a
well,
lot more years, but I don't
I hope
know.
so too, because you have to at least double your output of books. I mean, that's
Well, I've got a lot more coming out. Don't worry.
good. Well, I mean, what would you say though, to that person though that picks up your book and is going to read it now, that is at this may be their lowest moment, or maybe they even feel abandoned by God?
I would say if you're listening right now and you desperately need a miracle to the point where you are, your legs are, and your knees are buckling and you're having problem breathing, first of all, you got to remember you're not alone. God sees you. He knows exactly what you're going through. He's known from all eternity that you are going to need a miracle at this moment. And he knew that you'd be, tuning into Kris McGregor's program. He knew that even. He cares about you more than you know. Keeping that in mind, I would say there's 5 or 6 things that you should do, even if you weren't going to get my book. Okay. One of them, the first thing is, whenever you're experiencing anxiety, you've got to be able to take a breath and try to be calm and get centered, recollect yourself. As the Psalms say, be still and know that I am God. Try to put your emotions to the side for a moment. Don't feel faith, think faith. We all know that faith is the most important biblical requirement for a miracle. But instead of getting all worked up emotionally, make a decisive act of the will to trust God. And even if you're anxious and in emotional turmoil, say with Saint Faustina, Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you. That's the only prayer you have to remember. Okay, and just say that over and over again. Jesus, I trust in you. Second, and this is a hard one, you got to make a definitive decision to be sorry for all your sins and resolve to become a better, holier person.
Mhm.
In the Bible, Jesus used miracles to turn people around, to turn sinners around. He was concerned with the inner person's soul and not so much the outer person's ailments. His miracles were always a sign of a transformation of a person's soul. So if you need a miracle, you got to make a real effort to clear the decks spiritually. Ask for God's forgiveness, be willing to change. That's what God wants the most anyway, so you got to do it, right? Third, take whatever action you need. Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, the best thing is to keep going. Have
Yep.
that difficult conversation you've been putting off. Make that annoying phone call. Take that scary test you've been dreading. It doesn't have to be a big step. God doesn't expect perfection. He knows you're scared, but he wants you to show some kind of action to show that you trust him. Fourth, big one, get the community of believers on your side. Make use of intercessory prayer. Don't keep your miracle a secret. Tell as many people as you can. Go on social media. Ask your friends to pray for you. You don't have to tell people your specific problem. Just tell them to pray for your special intention. When they do that, God's going to know what that intention is. Uh,
Hmm.
Also, don't forget to get the angels and the saints to pray for you.
Amen.
They're very
Yep.
close to God. Their prayers are powerful, especially Our Lady. For goodness sake, get Our Lady involved. Remember, Mary isn't just the mother of God, she's the mother of miracles. Ask for her help. Next, almost done. What we
Keep
just said.
going.
Gotta be radically open to the will of God. Tell him what you want, be clear and precise, but then echo the words of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not my will, but your will be done. That's the model for all miracle prayers. That kind of surrender isn't weakness, it's spiritual power. It opens up all the channels to divine grace. It gives God permission to act in these wildly unexpected and incredibly miraculous ways. And that's what God will always do. He'll always do something unexpected. Something that you could never have imagined. And that's how you
Mhm.
know it's God, that it's not me that did this, it's God. And finally, this is something people forget. When you pray for a specific miracle, be sure to pray for God's greater glory too. This is so important. In other words,
Yep.
ask God to use your miracle to deepen the faith of the people around you, to make them realize that God is responsible for the great blessing that you're receiving, not you. When you see God's glory in your prayers, you acknowledge that your request isn't just about fulfilling selfish desires, but it's about spreading a faith in God to everyone. Again, that's what God wants. He wants to spread this faith, the good news, so that we can all share his love and joy, for not just here, but in heaven. So do what he wants us to do. And praying this way reflects not only a humble disposition, but a mature faith, and one that I think is more worthy and deserving of a miracle, frankly. So those are that's the book in quick summary, the abridged version, the abridged
I
version
just
right there.
I love your work. I love your mission. I'm so glad that you are truly a healer. You are truly a healer.
You're
You
kind.
know, and I have to say the miracle prayer. I
Yes.
think it's a prayer that's just like with our creed. It's a proclamation. I want to use the word catechesis of miracles. I mean, it is you if you can have that disposition of heart that you bring forward in that glorious miracle prayer, and just if you just said it every day, it just kind of moves you, not just when you're desperate, but it's almost in the everyday desire for his will.
Yeah, yes, and I want to, if there happen to be Protestants listening to this program, we're not encouraging rote prayer or superstition.
Mm-mm.
This prayer is difficult. It requires you to get into a certain state of sanctity, and I put all these paradoxes together into one prayer at the end, as you said. It isn't just the conclusion of the book; it's a distillation of everything that's in the book. It incorporates all these miracle paradoxes, all these conditions for being granted a miracle that Jesus seems to require, into one comprehensive, theologically sound prayer that it can be printed out, scanned, saved on your smartphone, and then prayed anytime, anywhere. I really wanted to give people something lasting, something that they could hold on to, pray regularly, even after finishing the book. Again, it's not magic. It's not a gimmick. It's a sincere way of praying that honors both our human desires and God's divine plan.
Well, it's the same reason why we pray the creed. I mean, it kind of helps us, brings us back to who we truly are. This is what we believe. And with this particular prayer, it helps us to orient our prayer. It helps the mind, like you've always said, it's going into that mind, grasping it, and then allowing it to make that journey into your heart, where the prayer originally originated anyway. That's the first place. It's uniting the two. It's bridging the two.
Yes, yes, yes. And as I say in the book, I really believe that we could be on a cusp of a new age of miracles. And the first age of miracles um, was 2,000 years ago, and it happened during the early apostolic age. And back then, bona fide miracles weren't just exceptions. They happened all the time. They were a constant part of life. Not only Jesus, but the apostles, many of the early church leaders, they healed the sick, they raised the dead, they cast out demons. It was a normal part of their ministry. And that's why the early church was able to grow so rapidly, even in the face of terrible persecution. And as I say in this book, and I really believe this, 2,000 years later, I think we're on the verge of a new age of miracles for similar reasons. Christianity is being persecuted all over the globe, all over the globe. And in the West, it's being persecuted too, not with lions or gladiators, but as you know, with ridicule and censorship and legal threats and the cancel culture and intense pressure and propaganda from the media and Hollywood and the academic world and the political world. And, we all know that the secular culture is openly hostile to basic Christian teachings, that we're viewed as bigoted and outdated and hateful and all the rest. And the attack, and I work in the pro-life movement, so the attacks on Christian values like marriage, the family, and on life itself, they're just relentless. And I think in this toxic environment, my fear is that words alone may not be enough to bring people back to the faith. We need something more. We need something miraculous. As Pope Benedict XVI said when he created the Pontifical Council, promoting the new evangelization. We have to preach the gospel again to a world that's forgotten it. And to me, it makes perfect sense that God would accompany a renewed effort at evangelization during this time of persecution with a fresh wave of miracles. A new age of miracles wouldn't just console the faithful, but it would help us to evangelize. It would help us to show the world once again that God is real, that he's powerful, that his love is calling us to conversion. So I say in this book, and I say it to the people who are listening to you now, take advantage of this time of purification. Don't ask for just one miracle. Ask for 5 miracles. Ask for 10 miracles. Let's try to usher in together a new age of miracles. And I'm really very serious when I say that. I believe every word.
I'm with you, my brother. I mean, I
Sound
totally.
like a Baptist preacher. I'm sorry.
Well, but
I'm
what's so
Catholic.
beautiful about it is that, there could be others who have this, maybe the same type of intent. But what you do, Anthony, is, because I've read so many other books and I've seen so many other things, but with yours, why it stands out is that it's, yes, those miracles can happen, but it's uniting it in that full communion with Christ. So that in doing the Father's will, no matter what that is, those miracles will be miracles, but they'll be His. And it may have to lead you through a fire of suffering, but you will, like those in the fiery furnace, you can make it through faith. You don't run from it, you don't bounce from it, you don't say it's not an unanswered prayer, but you have this way of being able to bring in that mystical, beautiful, traditional truths that has always been held in that patrimony of the church.
Well, well, thank you. You're being very kind. I'm going to have to pray some prayers of humility after speaking to you because you're making my head bigger by saying all these wonderful things about me. But it all, what I'll say this, it all boils down to, whether it's people going through intense suffering and this basic Christian Catholic teaching that God pulls blessing out of all suffering, any suffering. And it's such a hard teaching, but we know that God can do that because he did it with his own son. I tell this to people who are going through hard times, facing all kinds of really horrible things, some people who have lost children, really terrible suffering. Uh, the worst evil ever committed in this world was the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Why? Because that wasn't just homicide. That wasn't just patricide. That wasn't just genocide. That was deicide. That was the murder of God by his creatures. No, there's no act of ingratitude and depravity and obscenity worse than the murder of God by his creatures. But look, what did God do with that most evil of all acts? 3 days later, he brought forth the resurrection. And the resurrection wasn't just one person coming back to life. It was the reconciliation of God and man, the salvation of man. It opened up it made it possible for sins to be forgiven. It made it possible for us to receive countless graces. It threw open the gates of heaven. It made it possible for us to see our loved ones again and live forever. So that just wasn't a good thing. It was the greatest thing. So look what God did. He pulled out of the greatest evil, he pulled the greatest possible good. And if he could do that, then we have to have faith that he can pull some kind of blessing out of what you're going through right now, whoever you are, whether it's a financial problem or a medical scare or some kind of problem with your family, or if you're listening to this, in a traffic jam and you're just irritated. God can pull blessing out of absolutely everything. And that's the heart of the faith that we have. And that's why the symbol of our faith is a crucifix with God, with Christ suffering on it.
You talk about your paradoxes.
Yes, it
That's the Mac Daddy of all paradoxes.
certainly is.
Any final thoughts?
No, just to say that I always pray for the success of my books. I'm like everybody else. I want to be successful. You wouldn't write a book if you didn't want a lot of people to read it. I guess there's nothing selfish or mercenary about that. But I have to tell you, for this particular book, I have not prayed once for its success. I've prayed one thing, and I've tried to keep it so pure, which is rare for me because I'm not, I'm not I am not the most saintly person, despite
Oh,
what
stop.
you said about me. No, I'm not. I'm telling you the truth.
Okay.
Um, I'm Italian from Brooklyn. I got plenty of sins. What I've prayed for is that whoever reads this book or hears any of the interviews I'm on, even if they don't read the whole book, even if they read one page, even if they get to the first prayer, the first chapter, because as I said, it's a difficult, it's not an easy book. If they read anything or listen to me or us on this podcast, I pray that God grants them the miracle they want or gives them a powerful answer to prayer that gives them a peace that transcends all understanding. That's my only prayer. I've tried to keep it as pure as anything I've ever done in my life. And so that's the prayer. I would like your viewers to know that I really seriously am praying for them individually right now, that they get what they want and that God not only answers what they're saying, but what the deep desire of their soul. And now I'll stop talking.
Well, as one of those persons who is a recipient of that prayer, thank you. I mean, it's so gracious, and that's a servant's heart. That's the kind of prayer that I think God hears and
Oh.
will answer. So, Anthony DeStefano, you're just the best. I cannot wait for the next one, though I'll be listening to you and be encouraged not only through the audiobook, because it's so much fun. I went back to that, but I have to tell you, when I'm on a plane or somewhere and I just want to relax and I listen to your work, and um, it brings me a great deal of joy. But I also love reading you.
Just finished reading this book on audio tape in Manhattan for an audio tape just the other day. It'll be out next month in audio.
Excellent. But I love reading your work too. I mean, everything from what you have in the appendix and the saints that we can turn to and all the different helps. There's just nothing quite like your work, and you're you're a blessing. And I think you really have become a doctor for the layperson. So I am so grateful for that.
These things anybody's ever said. Thank you very much.
Well, God bless you. And, we look forward to the next time.
It'll be soon. Don't worry.
With Anthony DeStefano, we've gone inside the pages of The Miracle Book, a simple guide to asking for the impossible. To learn more about this book or to obtain a copy, go to sophiainstitute.com, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and or to download this conversation along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, visit discerninghearts.com, or you can find it within the free Discerning Hearts app or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. We hope that if this has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer authentic and rock-solid spiritual formation freely to souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, please consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible, to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors.